Hi Lynn, really nice to see you again, and thank you very much for taking the time out of your hectic schedule to have a chat about women in technology. So you're the Chief Data Officer at KPMG. Tell us a little bit about your current role.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I am the Chief Data Officer. I've been at KPMG now for just over a year. I joined in 2019 in December, before 3 months before our first lockdown. Absolutely. So my responsibility here is for defining and embedding an enterprise data strategy, and that means trying to get the best out of our data. So it's not clients' data, etc. It's our data, and kind of further enable us to be a data-driven organisation.
Okay, so it's an interesting time to have started your career at KPMG, just as lockdown hit. Yeah. So how did your career lead you to where you are now?
Okay, good question. It's been quite, I think, undulating, maybe the word to describe it. I've come across this in a few situations where people have similar stories. So I didn't always know I wanted to work in data. I always kind of wanted to know that I wanted to work in London in some kind of office role, but that was about as far as I got in terms of having a career plan. So I started in a market research agency, which is now part of the Kantar Group, a massive kind of organization,
Yeah.
in 1999, in the technology department. So I always knew technology was going to be part of what I do. Anyway, fast forward a few years, I joined PwC as their head of research at the time. So I was looking after all their internal research. So research remained a theme. And it was when I was there that I started to expand, what we can do with data and insights and things like that. So I started then looking after things like competitor intelligence and CRM and third-party data, etc. So data was always kind of something that, or insights at the time, was something I was really interested in. Then an opportunity arose to become the data and analytics lead internally at PwC. And it was when I was there that I suddenly went, this is it. This is the thing, data. This is what I want to work in. So I've been building up to this inadvertently. This is what I want to work in. And it became very clear that actually just focusing on the analytics bit and the insights bit wasn't going to give you that whole data picture, and wasn't going to help an organization. So I introduced data governance into what we did at PwC. Again, this was internally. So the next step, logical step, was Chief Data Officer. And the opportunity arose at KPMG. So I took it, basically, grabbed it with open arms. And that's kind of where I ended up in the role that I am.
Okay. And what would you say is your biggest achievement or career-defining moment to date?
Wow. Well, I hope to have more, but I think the main one was, it was all that aha moment around data being the thing that I wanted to do. So I think I was about 42 at the time. I'd been promoted. I'd got the role of looking after the analytics, and at the time we were embarking on some technology implementations at the organisation I was at, and I was a bit fearful that data wasn't being looked at in the right way. So clearly looking at how it was going to be reported on and how analytics was going to work at the other end. But I knew fundamentally that we needed to sort out our data kind of a bit earlier in that whole process, that whole value life cycle. Anyway, I wasn't getting the traction I needed to get people to listen to me.
Okay.
And after the technologies went in and problems started to occur, suddenly, all of a sudden, people were pointing to me and my very small team, saying, "Okay, right now we'll listen. We will, we need to kind of speak to you about how we can fix this, how we can fix some of these problems we've created." And data governance was born then at the organisation I was at the time. And for me, that signalled that, okay, we've now got. I was listened to. We've got the opportunity. We've got the burning platform. It's that everything came together, and we could go in and fix some of these problems, and that was massive, right? It was absolutely brilliant. Particularly working in an organization where, I was sitting in the technology function. It was predominantly male. It just gave me this really great validation that, I know what I'm talking about. So people are now listening. And listen, it wasn't the most optimum experience for me, but at the same time, it gave me the confidence to say, right, look, if sometimes you need to stick to your guns, if you know you're right, just keep at it, persevere, and people will listen. So I've kind of learned a lot from that moment. Doesn't sound like it's particularly exciting, probably to the people listening to this, but for me, it made me appreciate that I do know what I'm talking about, and I gave me the validation to then use that in future conversations, both
Yeah.
at that organisation and here as well.
Which is fantastic. So, as a woman in a very male-dominated environment, how did you get your voice heard? For anyone that's listening, thinking the same, saying, you know, I want to have my voice heard. How did you get your voice heard in that
Yeah.
kind of environment?
It's hard. It's not easy. I'm not going to lie. I mean, and it's not just. I don't think it's being a woman, but believe it or not, even though I've agreed to do this, I'm pretty introverted. So I think the first thing you need to do is be very self-aware, right? Be really, really self-aware of the kind of individual you are, how you like to operate,
Yeah.
because I think, you know. You almost need to take that step back and go, right, okay, do I like being the loud one in the room? Do I like being the quieter one, more reflective one? I think generally speaking, you know, women tend to come up against men who aren't like that, men who are more vocal and feel much more comfortable at expressing how they're feeling about things. So I
Yeah.
think first step is understanding who you are. The second thing, and I didn't get this right to start with, was use that style and use your kind of strengths to kind of get the message across in different ways. So what I mean by that is, if you're in a meeting and the 4 or 5 other individuals are male around you, and they are using their preferred style, which is a little bit combative and vocal and shouting and etc. Well, that firstly, that's not my style, and I'd really struggle with that, to kind of
Yeah.
match that. Secondly, matching that doesn't work. I found in my experience. So I had to find different ways to do it. What I'd usually do, and still to this day, what I do is, if there's something that I really, really needed to get either agreement on or sign off on or etc. or buy into, I wouldn't wait for the meeting to do that. So particularly if I knew it was going to be an environment where there was only one person that looked like me in the room, I'd do my prep work and kind of interact with the individuals beforehand.
Okay.
Similarly, follow up afterwards, because that played to my strengths of, I'm great one-on-one, really have, love being one-on-one with
Yeah.
individuals, can have a really good conversation, do it over coffee, whatever, or virtual coffee now. That's how I tackled it. I felt that I wasn't able to, what I felt I needed to do was match that level of energy and loudness, and that just isn't me. So I had to find a way for it to work for me. So that's how I tackled it.
And I think it's really great that you said you knew what you were saying was correct and you stuck to your guns, and eventually they turned around and said, actually, you're right, and move forward with it. So it's great, isn't it? And it's good
Yeah.
to hear a good story like that.
And I mean, that's the other thing. And I have given that advice, and I don't know if it's just a female thing, but I've given that advice before, that sometimes, you're right, but no one's listening. So that still happens, right? People aren't listening.
Yeah.
So my view is, if it's a good idea or it's the right thing to do, it may be the wrong time, or you may be speaking to the wrong person, or you may
Yeah.
be selling your idea in the wrong way. So I've benefited over the year from a lot of coaching and mentoring. So when you get that opportunity, grab it, right? Working with a coach on this particular data governance issue, they helped me frame the what I was asking for, the argument, in such a way that it became so compelling. So yes, I had the opportunity because something had gone wrong, but at the same time, we worked on making that a really compelling argument and kind of really picking the language.
And speaking of the coach, that was one of my questions. Who has helped shape your career? Who's assisted and helped and mentored and coached?
Absolutely. So I think I've always been fairly self-driven and self-sufficient, and that that kind of, when you get more senior, I think that can be a little bit dangerous for your mental health, and it certainly was for mine. So um, I didn't think I needed anyone really, but so, as I said, when I became a director, I think we were offered, you're offered as standard some kind of support with the transition to that level, because you
Okay.
are becoming more senior.
Yeah.
And I took it, yeah, so we had some external training courses that we were on. There was a whole program of investment. This was back at PwC, that I kind of, took on board. And they really advised, creating peer networks and
Mm.
kind of stuff that I would have thought was ridiculous, years prior to that. But what was really nice about those peer networks is and the kind of environment in which they were created, we were able to be really honest with each other and actually explain that we were all honest. All of us had various insecurities, and just being able to talk about them openly with a set of peers. So that really helped actually, because it's you can be honest, and kind of shape your explain how you're feeling, and kind of work on things together and bounce ideas off different people, but also get a different perspective. You assume, I mean, or maybe other people don't, but I assume that, there's one way to look at things. And, I was, assuming the worst in a situation, where this peer network would then point out the alternative point of view, which I think is really helpful. And then when I joined KPMG again as a new joiner to the organisation, we were given the opportunity to work with a coach. So I have worked very well with a coach here. We've had 7 sessions, have been absolutely amazing. I've worked through everything from the transition to, a different organisation. CDO was a brand new role here, and it was just me to start with how you deal with that, how you build a network, how you do that in COVID times. So definitely coaching and kind of having mentors has helped me. And then there's been some inspiring people along the way. I mean, in particular, my boss at the minute, she's so inspiring, right? So it's hard not to be inspired by her.
Yeah.
So that, you kind of think, well, I want to grow up, I want to be like her. There's definitely a little bit of that happening. And I've had periods along the way where I've had those kind of leaders around me, but Lisa Hennigan, who's my boss now, she's definitely one that absolutely I'd love to aspire to be, as I said, when I grow up.
I think having a mentor is very important. I think some see asking for help as a weakness. And I think, having somebody there, if you are one of those type of people where you think I should know how to do it, I think it's just really important for us all to have somebody to turn to. Even if we've not got any questions, having that person there, I think, is really important. It's great that you feel that with your current manager as well, which is great.
Definitely.
What's your biggest surprise been about your current career in data and technology?
There's 2 things actually, and they've kind of occurred to me over the last few months. One is, and maybe it isn't a surprise to others, but one is that you're not all talking about the same thing when you talk about data, right? And I think that's really it's really powerful to kind of, if once you get that, and I only really
Yeah.
got that literally in the last few weeks. So you think you're having a conversation with someone to talk about something that you're planning to do, and they're not there. They think they're there, or you think they're there, and they're not. So I think it's really, really important, and really surprising that you almost need to, at the start of any conversation, sit down and go, right, let's just be clear what we're talking about. And it's okay if you have a different interpretation of me,
Yeah.
that's absolutely fine, but let's kind of level set a little bit. And I don't know, yeah, it surprised me that we needed to do that, because everybody's talking about data, right? Everybody's
Yes. Yeah.
talking about it. But actually we're all talking about it in slightly different ways, so that really surprised me. And then the second thing is that this is not really about technology and fancy visualizations half the time. There's so much behavioral change that needs to happen in order for people to truly embrace data.
Yeah.
Um, and again, bit of a surprise, because other organizations I've worked in where it's been the kind of, the almost visualization has been seen as the panacea of everything. Let's just get it in a dashboard, and then or get it in a PowerPoint, and everyone's going to see what we can see. And I kind of operate a little bit like that. It's less about that. It's more about bringing people with you, that behavioral change. So that's been quite surprising. You kind of assume that people are, well, again, I've made the assumption that people are quite visual. They can see it there and they can react to something that you've kind of built. But actually,
Yeah.
it's much more about those relationships and, bringing people on the journey, etc. So it's quite personal, which is also a bit of a surprise.
So what advice would you give to your younger self?
Ease up on yourself a little bit. You don't, you're not going to have all the answers, and it's okay to get things wrong, by the way. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got the same now. I've got a 10-year-old son. I've got nieces who are, one of them is at the age where they're going to be thinking about, maybe GCSEs or whatever they are now, the equivalent are now. And there's so much pressure to make the choices that are going to affect the rest of your career and rest of your life, when in actual fact, they really don't. I mean, there are certain professions, clearly you can't be a doctor
Of
without doing the
course.
certain kinds of
Yeah.
things, but there's so many different ways you can go. And that's what I'd like to get across, is my career I didn't have this planned out trajectory, and I've ended up in something that I really love doing. I feel very lucky. So it's okay if you get a few things wrong. It's okay if you don't make the right decision. And I've had jobs where proper jobs where it hasn't worked out and I've not
Yeah.
enjoyed it, and but learned from the experience and moved on. We're all going to do that, and that's okay. That's probably what I would say to myself.
It's a great advice that you might not get everything right first time. And
Definitely.
not to worry. So it's a great message. So we talked about what your biggest achievement has been to date. What's your next ambition? What have you got your sights set on next?
I mean, I've been given such an amazing opportunity here at KPMG to kind of, help them be data driven. Think about some really innovative ways that we can take some of the day-to-day pain points and actually make them a breeze. I want to kind of, we talk about building this data community and a data culture. I want to do that. I want people to get excited about the power of data.
Yeah.
And one of the ways we can do that is getting people involved and actually showing them the value of it. So that they're the kind of things is really truly unleashing this amazing power we've got with data. And we've had to focus on, at most organizations, you go in and you have to focus on sorting some of the foundations out to start with. But once you've built some of those foundations, you can go and
Yeah.
the opportunities are absolutely exponential as far as I'm concerned. So it's showing people the power and getting them to kind of engage with it and help us with it, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of next thing.